Hello everybody, it's Claire here from Sewing by Claire, and I just wanted to say hello to all of my new subscribers. We've had quite a few just recently, and I know that most people on my channel, from those that have answered the questionnaire or the poll in the community tab, have said that they prefer the lunar lapping videos, but there's still a number of people who like the dressmaking videos, and I have to say I love making my own clothes as well. So I thought that I'd just interject some of the lunar lapping videos with this dressmaking video, and hopefully it'll be of interest. But I do hope that those that watch my videos for lunar lapping will actually find that I apply the same approach to my tutorials for sewing clothes. So I'm hoping that it might inspire somebody to have a little go. Let me know in the comments if you feel like having a go after you've watched this video. So my husband's away on business trip this week, so I've actually got the week to myself. So obviously that means I'm going to party. Now, for those that sew, we know that when we say the word party, we mean stay at home and sew, usually in our pyjamas, but obviously when I'm videoing, I can't put my pyjamas on. But yeah, just as whilst he's away, I'm just going to take full advantage. That means I can get the cutting table out, I can get myself, well, it's my kitchen island actually, but I can cover that over. I've not got anybody asking me when dinner's ready or what we're having, and I can just sew to my heart's content and make a mess if I want to. So I'm sure some of you will understand completely where I'm coming to from with that. So just to say, the dress that I'm wanting, well, the dress that I'm wearing is my wearable toile of the Cashmerette Rivermont dress. And what I want to do is I want to make another one in these because it's such a comfy dress and I'm really pleased with how it looks. So what I'm going to do is I wanted to have a go at making it up. And I had a look around for a couple of tutorials and there's not that many, so I thought, well, there's a little bit of a niche. But also I saw on one of the Cashmerette Facebook groups that somebody had problems with the chip pockets. So if you're the lady who had trouble with your pockets, I'm sorry I can't remember your name, then hopefully I'll be able to show you how to do it. And we're going to take it step by step, the same way as we do with the lunar lapping videos. If you're familiar with those, it's a stuffed toy that's available in the UK that we make up and make the clothes for. But if not, then pure dressmaking is your thing, then you were in the right place. So what I have got is I've got the pattern here, which is this one here, Cashmerette Rivermont. And I do think that from the pattern on the front here, you can't actually see the details of the dress. So if we just turn it round and have a look at the line drawing, we can see we've got double darts here on the bodice, we've got a scoop neck, there's a variety of lengths for sleeves, it's got pockets that are on a slant and double pleats here also. Sorry, I'm a bit wobbly. I've got my heels on just so that I can show you my dress. And then down the back, although it's got a centre back seam, the dress hasn't actually got a zip. It just goes straight over your head. So if you're a little bit worried about doing zips, then this is a great starter for you. The other alternative is you can put a peplum bottom on the top as well, so to use the same bodice, and then it's just got this peplum top if you wanted to. But I'm going to make the dress, and I'm going to make another one with these long sleeves because I think that's going to be nice and warm and toasty for in the winter, as it is now starting to be in Spain where I live. So my first choice of fabric is this one, and oh, it's looking upside down. Hold on a second, that way. Is this fabric here. It's a scuba. It's got lots of lovely drape. It's super soft to the touch, and I've been saving this fabric now for a couple of years. I bought it on a shopping trip with my sister Sarah in Sheffield when I was there visiting one day, and it might be a bit tight on the amount of fabric I've got because I think I've got 2 meters of this, or 2.5, and I think I need slightly more for the dress, but we're going to have a go and see and make sure that I can get it out of this. So I'm recording this in anticipation that I can, so keep your fingers crossed for me. But I just think that's just going to look really lovely. The colours on there, lovely and autumnal, and I think that's going to look really fab. And the other thing is that it's got a really obvious wrong side and right side. So when I'm demonstrating how to sew this, and especially with the pockets, that's going to make it really easy for you guys to see as well. So hopefully that's going to be helpful to you. The other fabric I got, because I bought 3 lots of fabric from Sew Wardrobe when they were closing, I got this chocolate brown cotton Ponte Roma, which was a dream to sew. I also picked up this lovely purple as well, which is one of my favourite colours. I love purple. And so I will make it in that one as well. The reason why I want to choose this one is because you won't be able to tell the right side and the wrong side for this fabric, whereas you can on this one, on the scuba. So we're going to have a go with that, and that should make that a lot easier. But the first thing that I want to do is I made up this chocolate brown wearable toile, and I just pretty much made it straight out of the pattern. I did go on the Cashmerette website and put in my details as to what dress size I normally wear, bra size I normally wear, and my measurements, and it came up with a 14 top, a 16 waist. Now I still did a 16 hips, and I probably should have graded out to an 18 on the hips, but do you know what, it's pretty okay actually, and I'm really quite pleased with the fit. Got a little bit of a VPL going on, visible panty line going on, but I've also, disclaimer here, I have just put on my Bridget Jones pants in order to smooth out, so they're just slightly sucky in, but if anybody's had children or anybody's got a few extra inches, as Cashmerette patterns are perfect for, such as me, then smoothing those lines out is also a really nice thing to do. So I think Ponte doesn't really forgive very well when you've got no foundation garments on, but if you've got your opaque tights on because it's it's winter and you want to stay toasty, or if you're happy to wear a little pair of sucky pants, as I call them, then it works really well. So I'm going to take a bit of a video from a distance so you can have a look and see this, and then we'll talk again about the fit that I've got on this dress and what I might want to tweak for the next one that I'm going to be making. So hopefully that little twill video has just given you a bit of an idea as to, maybe you've got your own ideas as to what I ought to be changing on the pattern for this one. I know the only change, pretty much out of the patterns I said, but the only thing I did do was these horizontal darts here, I did have to lower those slightly. I've got a more mature body and therefore the bust point was slightly high. But then I find that on my Upton dresses as well, that the bust point on that was too high as well, so I have lowered that. The centre, the darts underneath were great, so that's all fine. And the waist is sitting nicely. It might be a little bit high for some people, but it hits me quite nicely on my narrowest part just here. And I don't mind that slightly empire line kind of look, so I'm going to stick with that. The main change I wanted was on the pockets here. I do feel that there's sort of a bit of a drag down in this area here, which I didn't really like very much. Obviously at the moment I've not put a belt on this because I wanted you to see the dress as it is, but you may choose that when you style this, and I mean a nice wide sash belt would be nice. The other thing that I thought is it one of those quilted Obi-Wan kind of belts that sort of have a thicker band around the front and then cross at the back and then tie narrowly at the front with a bow. I thought that would look really nice. And I have got some mock suede, so at some stage I might have a go at drafting one of those and making one of those for me. But just for the purposes of showing you how this looked for now, then I thought that would be a good idea. So I didn't alter the length of the bodice at all on this one. And the pockets are really deep, so if you can see where my hands are going to, they're really deep. So I don't need pockets as deep as that, I don't think. I mean, it's nice to have your hands right thrust in, but I think that it's just created a little bit of a drag and a little bit of extra lines that I don't really need. So I'm probably going to shorten my pockets up here. There is an option as well that if you wanted to, you could just fix your pockets down, and that would then sort of like with top stitching down to the pocket lining here, and you would be able to then smooth that out. The other thing that I've noticed is that there's a bit of a void here in the centre area where it does show tummy button line and panty line if you've got your underwear on there and it's not right up to your waist. And so I think that what I might try and do on my next Ponte one, not on this one that I'm going to make now, but on my next Ponte one, is actually carry the pocket lining all the way across this band here, so it almost gives me two layers of fabric in this area, which then one fabric can stick to my panty lines and the other can then hopefully glide over the top. So I'm going to try that, and I think that should be fairly straightforward to do, she says, but I'll have a look at that in future, but that's a bit of a pattern change and a bit more advanced than what I want to do today. So for this one, I am going to just, the lower dart ending, because there's two darts here, the top one I think is okay, but the lower one is a little bit low for me, and I'm going to just take that one high because the bulk of my weight is here on my tummy, so I want to just cover that up a little bit more, and just if I bring those dart lines up slightly, only by maybe half an inch or so, I think it'll put more of the fullness where I want it at the end of those darts. I've got plenty of room to wear it, so I'm comfy with that. And whilst we have got a little bit of a VPL on the back there, I think once I've got tights on, which I would normally wear this dress with it being a winter dress, then I will do that. Sleeves are fine, I didn't have to do anything with that. The length, you can't quite see it on here, I did take a couple of inches off the length of it as well, because I'm a 4.5 kind of height, and so that's what I needed to do to get this length, so it hit me on my just below my knee, but just above my boot line, which is where I wanted to wear it. So this is the dress. I don't think I need to make many more changes. I'll just change that dart length. I'll save the couple of inches off the bottom of the skirt, because that might mean that I've got enough then to make it out of my fabric. And we're going to just then pretty much make it the same. I'm happy with where the shoulder points fit on my shoulder, and I'm happy with the wide neck here, which I think is quite flattering because I feel I've got a short neck here, so I tend to favour something that's scoop necked or that's got a V neck on it, and in future iterations I might make a different neckline, but for now I'm just going to copy this one. And again, I think that's going to look really quite smart. So hopefully you've enjoyed having this quick little look at the wearable toile that I've made, and hopefully it's given you some ideas for fitting for your Rivermont dress as well. I really do like Cashmerette patterns, I have to say. For my body shape and type, they fit really well, so I feel that's really a real plus point for me, that I can choose a Cashmerette pattern and pretty much hopefully it's going to fit. The only way that you'll know if it fits you and your body size not body size, body shape, and whatever it is, we're all unique, then is to make up a wearable toile, perhaps in you can use, I mean this is a stretch fabric, but you just need some stretch fabric with the right amount of stretch in it. It can be as cheap as you like for your first one, and then hopefully you when you come to make it for the second time, you use a fabric that you're more precious about, and you'll be really pleased with the result. So I'm going to get on with the pinning and the cutting and the sewing. I'm going to take you along with me, and we'll just have a go at making this dress, and hopefully you'll find some bits that you find interesting. I'm also going to timestamp the video down below in the description, so if you are just interested in how the pockets are constructed or how anything else is constructed, then you can jump ahead should you wish to. So I won't mind at all if you don't want to know all of it, because I do waffle a bit. But hopefully in that waffle there are some really interesting points for dressmaking that will help you elevate your makes as well. So thank you for joining me today. If you do like the video, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'd be really happy to have you along, and there will be more dressmaking videos as we get going. Now to the pattern and the cutting. So welcome to my kitchen. The heels are off, so that means we mean business now. And what we're going to do now is talk about the pattern changes that I've made, just to make those alterations so that I can transfer those from the toile that I'm wearing and put those onto the pattern pieces, so that when I cut it out, we can just go straight ahead and sew. We've not got any of those fitting issues. So I'm just going to angle you down onto my island. Now actually it's not an island, it's a breakfast bar, isn't it? But it makes a really, really good cutting table. And I've just covered it with this felt-backed, plastic-topped table protector that I picked up. And it's fabulous because the pins don't go through and scratch the work surface, and I can just roll it up, make sure there's no grease marks on my fabric at all, and just get going with it. Sorry, I can't get my words right. So that's a really good suggestion. The other thing that I've done as well is before, when I've had to cut outside, so if you use like a pasting table, or you use like an occasional table and it's just a bit too low and it catches you right on your back, look in your kitchen and just have a look, because I've often used large tins of I don't know, vegetables or fruit or what have you, or sauces, and use those, and they will elevate your table just by that 3 or 4 inches will just make all the difference to your back. So have a go at that. The other thing that I do is if I'm using a tin that's got a ready scored top to it, I do turn it over so I'm on the bottom of the tin, so that if you do press down on it at all, then I'm not going to go through and have an explosion of contents everywhere. So just be aware of that. But those kind of tables are fabulous. If you're in a smaller space, obviously you can use the floor as well. It's just that at my age, then I prefer to use something a bit higher. And this, when we redesigned this kitchen, then I just thought, I had one in my old house and in this apartment, and I just knew that we needed something like that. So it goes straight across I've got an induction cooker hob, and it just goes straight across the top. You can see my hob there underneath, and that works really well. So, lost a pattern piece. So that's a good idea for you too, if just a few little tips. So let's get on. I'll angle you down, and we'll get on with changing this pattern round. Okay, so I've just got some scrap tissue paper. And I've just got my quilting ruler, which is just a nice long straight line, but any ruler will do, or straight edge. And I've got a pencil to use. The other thing that I've done is I've separated out my pattern pieces into the things that I don't need to alter. So I don't need to alter the sleeves, I don't need to alter the back or the facings. All of those are going to stay exactly the same as they are. But what I do want to change is the pocket slightly, and I want to change the skirt pieces, and I want to change the bust darts on the bodice front. So let's start with these pockets first. Now, as we can see, they're really quite deep on here. So I'm going to reduce this by about 3 or 4 inches and just give me a nice curve on the bottom there. The other thing that I did that I'd forgotten to mention about before is that, as you can see, this pattern piece here scoops away, and that's the point that it sort of scoops away at the centre front. And what I want to do is I want to extend this up, because what can happen is with a big pocket bag like this, when you've got a lot of weight on a small amount of anchoring point, if I lower it down you can see that small amount of anchoring point and a lot of weight of your pocket, it can actually drag your pocket down and make it misshapen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square up the inside edge, the tummy edge if you like, of this pocket bag so that it's straight up, and that will give it more to hold on to at this straight edge. And I'll have to do that on both of these pieces here, because this one's the same, because this pocket fits over the top of that one, so they need to match just so they've got something to hold on to. And I'm also going to reduce the bottom here. So let me get hold of my tape measure, and we'll just do that now. It's fairly quick and easy. I'm not going to labour the point. So let's take these pattern pieces up first in size. So at the moment they match, and I'm going to take, I think, 3 inches off the bottom. I can always take more off if I want to in future views, but just for now I think 3 inches is going to be enough. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to give it a nice scoop edge off the 3-inch mark, and that's just going to take it into where it was joined anyway. So I've just taken that across like that, and then I will then pin these together and cut them out so that they will be the same. So let me get some pins. The other thing to say is that I don't know whether or not you cut your pattern pieces out from your original pattern, but I'm going to challenge you on that and suggest that you look at investing in some tissue paper. It's quite economical to buy from a craft supplies shop or online. You can use Swedish tracing paper as well, which is a little bit more robust than this paper. But what that means is that when I get my pattern pieces out of the packet here, you get this lovely tissue paper to work with. What I do is, because it's multi-sized, so you have several sizes on one pattern, and here's our size key. So this one goes from a size 12 to a size 28. Once you've cut out on one of those pattern lines, should your size change or you want to make the dress for somebody else, you're going to have to buy a new pattern, because you won't be exactly sure where those pattern markings go. And as you can see, they kind of cross over each other in certain places. So if you get used to just using your tissue paper, tracing paper, and trace the size off that you're using, you can then keep your main pattern intact so that you can use it multiple times. So that's what I always do with all of my patterns, is I don't ever cut out the master. So I've always got that one available to me. And patterns aren't cheap, are they? I mean, I know a lot of work goes into creating them, but if I can make that one, I mean, this one was £16.50, so it's, you know, it's not cheap, it's an investment. But if I can keep that intact now and then use that time and time again, then that really appeals to my frugality, really, I suppose. So that's why I'm working with this white tissue paper, because that's exactly what I've done. I've traced out this pattern already, and then I'm just using it then to make my alterations. So let's just make these alterations on this pattern here. So I've pinned both the front and the back pocket pieces together, have changed it slightly over here, and I think I might take some off the edge here. There's no exact science to this little bit, because this is just a pocket bag, so it doesn't matter so much, but I just didn't want it pulling into the centre as it has done in the past. So this is how much I've taken off, which is, I'll just get one piece, which is 3 inches from the bottom. Okay, just in case you like the look when it's all finished and want to do the same. So that's out of the way, so I can separate those two for now, because that's cut the curve out at the bottom here. I did alter it slightly from there. I wanted it just to fit the pattern piece as much as possible. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do with these pattern pieces here is I want to extend this up so we've got more that it's holding on to on the tummy area. Let me just get the picture and I'll show you where. So here in the centre front, I'm extending the line of the pocket because it's quite narrow there, and I want it to be more in the centre. So I've got a piece of scrap tissue paper here, and I am just going to tape that onto, move it across a bit there so you can all see, just tape it onto the top of the pattern here, and then when I've finished I'm just going to copy this line here and copy it straight up so that I add a chunk onto my pattern piece. So let's just do that then, if I can get this to cut. Magic tape is the best thing to use, but it's hard to get here in Spain, it's quite expensive. So pencil here, using my line here, I'm going to copy the line across on the front of on the top of the pocket, so that line is straight. Oh, that's curved slightly. Let's take it in like that. And then I'm going to then take the edge of this pocket up and give me much more then to hold on to. So I've just extended that line there at the front, and I've just added this piece here onto there. So now we can cut out on that new line. And that's just altered that pattern just to give us that much. So we've added, how much have I added here at this top edge? 1 3/4 inches I've added across to the centre front, so that will alter that piece. And then what we need to do here is do the same on here. So I'm doing the same on the pocket lining as I am doing on the outside pocket bag. So I just need to make sure that we've got enough space to be able to add what we need to add. So I tape it on. So you do need to get used to making pattern changes and without being too scared of it. And if you're not scared already, perfect. But those that are a little bit nervous about it, if we're adding, it's great because we can always take it away again in the future. But if we don't add any on and change our patterns, then we're not going to be able to personalise it to our individual body shape. And that's what the difference between getting a great fit. So all I've done is laid my new pattern piece with the other pocket, for the pocket facing, over the top of the pocket, the pocket facing was there, the pocket back, and then I'm just going to trim this off now and on that new line. So those two now will match. So we've shortened it by 3 inches and we've added 1 3/4 inches on this top edge. So that's our new pattern pieces there. Get rid of our rubbish. The next one we've got here is our bodice front, and what I want to do is I want to lower the bust start just here. So what I have done before on this is if you hold it up against yourself and then just get the thing right. You can put your finger on the widest part of you, draw it with a pencil if you can, on the right side of the pattern, so that's the side of the pattern. And I can see that my bust point I want is here, and the original dart is up here. So I'm going to lower that down. But I'm just going to mark it in for now so that we've got some idea, because I actually need to lower, there's a curve here for the bust, and I need to just lower that as well. Okay, so I just had a quick moment of double thinking, but what I ended up doing was I have extended, there was a curve here that comes out for the side bust, and what I've done is I've just lowered that curve down into the waistline. I've then measured 1.5 inches, because my bust point was about 1.5 inches lower than on the pattern, and so I've moved the leg of this one down 1.5 inches and drawn a line straight across to the apex. I've measured 1.5 inches in from the bust point because I want to have some room there, and then I've drawn my second leg, which was the same distance that this dart was, further down here, and then just join them up. The other thing that I'm going to do is just move this dart here just slightly underneath, so it's sort of straighter up and it points towards my bust dart, but still do 1.5 inches away. So this waist dart here will just move slightly across because my bust isn't as close set as the one on the pattern. So I'll just do that change as well. So that's my finished pattern piece, and then I've got the bust dart here moved down. You might not be able to see very well. Bust down 1.5 inches, and I've moved this one up across so that it's slightly, not slightly, so that it is underneath my bust, and I've just slightly shortened that one. So that's done now. So that's the pocket and the bodice front done. Don't think we need to do anything else on those. And then on the skirts, what I wanted to do on the skirt front was I wanted to lower the dart, higher the dart by about 1/2 inch to 1 inch, I'll say 1 inch. So I've just drawn a line up on the bottom of the dart to move that line up, and then I just redraw my dart legs into the centre of that to then match that new finish, and just scribble out the bottom of the dart, and that'll give me a new finishing point for that, which I'll be happy with. I don't need to change the pocket here because I haven't changed this angle of the pocket at all. I've just added some fabric in at the waistline here, so that's fine. And then the other thing that I did was I measured my skirt, and because I'm really short on fabric, because I've got 2 metres and the pattern calls for 2.5 metres, so again, keep your fingers crossed, folks, but if I switch to a different fabric, you'll know why. And we are just going to take 1 inch off this length because I'm confident that that will be sufficient for me. So I'm just going to cut that straight across. So that's an easy, it's a straight skirt hem, so that's fine. So before we forget, we're now going to do that on the skirt back as well. So we're just going to measure 1 inch up, draw a line and snip it off, because that might be the difference between my fabric fitting and not on the pattern. Now this pattern does have a back vent, but I'm not going to use it because it's a stretchy fabric. Then I like the look of a straight skirt without a vent on the back of it. So for that, all I'm going to do is just fold my vent in like that, and it's just out of my way, and I'll just pin it with it and use it without it. The back dart I thought was fine, so I'm not going to change that. And I think that's everything. Okay, let's get on to laying our fabric out. This is where you need to keep your fingers crossed for me, please, folks. So the first thing we have to do is have a look on our pattern, on our fabric, and have a look for whether it's got a right or a wrong direction. And this one has got a very deliberate and very obvious right side up and down pattern. So these stems here of the flowers all point upwards. So I can't tip any of my pattern pieces upside down. I've got to treat this as a directional fabric, which could cause us some problems. So let's have a look and see. The other thing that we need to be aware of is whether or not we've got any pattern that we can match as we're placing our fabric out. Now, as I haven't got enough here for pattern matching per se, and because it's a fairly busy print, I'm just going to go with placing my pattern pieces as best as I can. If I find when I lay them out that I've got a bit more room than I thought, then I can look at positioning them a little bit better to try and get some of these diagonal lines of these dandelion puffs going across to match across my front and my back. But because I can I've not got to worry about that too much because the back bodice is straight. There's a straight line. I could always cut that on a fold as well if I wanted to. So that's the front with the bust darts, and then under here we've got the back, and the back is a straight line, so that's not a straight line on some, so that you can alter it if you need to, or if you've got a sway back, but I've not had to make any of those adjustments, so I know I can cut that one out on a fold too. So those two can cut out on a fold, and then the skirt front and the skirt back, if we have enough fabric, I can cut out on the fold as well. We'll have a look and see. The sleeves may end up having to be slightly shorter, and that's the piece I'll probably position last, because that I can alter the sleeves, and if I have to go to 3/4 sleeves or even short sleeves in order to fit it on the fabric, then I will do, and that's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. So we just have a look at our pieces and see what we need to be put on our fabric, and then we're going to see about folding cutting those out. So let me just pop that on here. The other thing you can do is you can cut it out singularly, your fabric and your pattern, if you wanted to, if you are short. That can be more economical on your fabric. The only thing you have to remember then is about mirroring pieces. So if you cut out something, say like a pocket, just need to bear in mind your pattern pieces, because when you've got a non-symmetrical pattern such as these pocket pieces, you're going to need a left and a right front pocket and a left and a right pocket facing. So you're going to have to cut one out with your writing on your pattern up, and then flip it over and cut one with your pattern, with your right pattern writing down, and that will give you a mirrored copy. So when you cut those out and put them side to side, you'll have a left and a right. If you cut two out just like that, 1, 2, you're only going to have 2 lefts or 2 rights depending on the orientation. So you do need to watch that if you're cutting out on a single when you're mirroring your fabrics. So let's hope that we don't need to do that, and let's hope we can get this fabric cut so that it will be okay, and we can get all of our pattern pieces out. So the way that I try to cut things out, if I can, is I will fold the fabric into the middle, and that does give me 2 runs of a fold on the fabric. And again, if you remember, I'm saying that I'm not pattern matching. If you were doing pattern matching, you'd have to be aware of your pattern and how it fits on top of each other, but with this one I'm going to just go for it, and hopefully we'll be fine. So I'm folding this fabric in half. We need to go to the widest pattern piece, and my pattern piece will fit on there because that's extra fabric, that's extra tissue paper there that I haven't cut off. So let me just fold it to that line there. And then the bodice pieces as well, we can make sure that the bodice piece is going to fit on, and it is. So I think we might be okay for fabric, folks. So let's put the skirt pieces over here. That's one skirt piece on a fold. And this is going to be our other skirt piece, again on a fold. And both will fit on either side. So actually, I think we're going to be okay. So this might be a different way of folding. So in order to make sure that you've got your pattern straight on your fabric, we now just need to check the grain of the fabric. And so using our tape measure, which is hiding, I am going to measure at the top of the fold here, across to from the selvage edge that I put into the middle here, across to the edge, and we're just over 13 inches there, and we know that that will fit on the fabric that I need. So we go down to 13.5 there, and again we're up to 15, so I know this isn't straight at the moment, so I need to just manipulate this fabric, reaching across. It's got a nice slippy back to it, so hopefully that's not going to cling onto my underwear like this ponte has done. So let's switch over to centimetres. So we're 32.5 centimetres there, and we're 34 there. So again, holding onto this top edge, just going to fold this bit back. Still a little bit too much. And this could take some time, so I'm going to release you whilst I do this and jump ahead. But basically, I'm going to do this on both sides to make sure that my fabric is straight on both sides. and if I can manage not to have a gap down the middle, then I will do, but I'm always going to try and make sure that I can save as much fabric as possible whilst I'm measuring this out and working with this fabric. Still a bit too far over. Okay, so this is where we are at the moment. I've got my skirt front and back on the fold, and I've got my bodice front and back on the fold as well, and that's worked out quite well. But I still have quite a lot of fabric left in actual fact, so cutting out this pattern using the double fold method of fabric has worked really well. So just remember to measure your sides and make sure that your pattern is equal. The other thing that I have done is I have got this strip of fabric down the middle, but I think that when I come to cutting out my pockets, I'll be able to get at least one, maybe even two pieces out of this central piece, not all the way down, but I will be able to get one or two pieces cut out of here. So that's an economical use of the fabric as well, so I'm going to do that. So for now, because I'm happy that I've got more than enough fabric down this bottom end for my long sleeves to fit on, and because I want to fold the fabric differently for doing the sleeves, then I'm going to not put that on the fabric at the moment because I've still got quite a lot left, if you see. So for now, I'm happy that I'm going to I've got enough room. Now normally I would say to you, pin out all of your pattern pieces first, just to make sure don't get to the end and then you realise that you've missed a pattern piece off. But for this one, I think I'm going to be safe with the amount of fabric I've got left, so I'm going to go ahead and cut out these 4 pieces to start off with, and then we'll move on with the rest of the fabric afterwards. I managed to cut out the fronts and the backs of the skirt and the front and the back of the bodice, and I've actually managed to squeeze out one copy of the pocket just by cutting that on the single out of the middle section, but the rest of it isn't quite wide enough. Your fabric might be. The next piece that I want to now place is actually my sleeve, because that's the next big piece I've got, and the rest we can fit around. The facings we can always piece together if we need to in order to make those fit. So for now, what I need to do is work out what my widest point is on my sleeve, and that's 14.5 inches. So I need to make sure that my fabric is going to go across 14.5 inches. Again, if you've got more fabric than I have to play with, you could pattern match so that you get the same sort of part of the design at the top of the shoulder, and then obviously your hem will finish the same. But I'm not so worried about that. For now, I'm more worried about making sure that it actually fits on my pattern. So I know my widest point is 14.5 inches, which is, hold a second, 50 centimetres, 37 centimetres, and I need to leave a centimetre and a half for the selvage because I don't ever sew with the selvage. So we've got 37, so we've got 38.5 we need to go to in order to fit the sleeve on. So let's just move this back again, and I'm just going to do the same thing that I've done before, measure top and bottom to make sure that my fabric is as straight as I can get it, 38.5, before putting my pattern piece on, and that will at least mean that it's as straight as I can get it. So again, just keep your eye out as well for flaws on your fabric, because if you've got anything you need to avoid, then you need to avoid that. Apologies for the road noise, but we live in an apartment complex, and as you can imagine, then real life goes off. It doesn't just stop just because I'm sewing. So 38.5, happy with that all the way through. So now we can place our pattern piece onto here with confidence. And I try and use as much of the fabric as I can do, so it will leave this small section down here as spare, but I do like to try and use it as economically as possible, because you never know when that might come in handy for something. So again, I'm going to use my grain line, because we've got a grain line on this pattern piece, and I'm going to measure the grain line out to the fold. So that's 10.5 there, but going off the edge. So let's just move it the other way. So perhaps to 11. Yeah, that's to 11. Put a pin at the top here so that holds that side straight. Just make sure that your pattern is on both sides, is going straight through on both sides. And again, to here it's slightly twisted, so bring it back in. And that one there needs to go to 11 as well, just to make sure that's straight of grain. And it is. So So then holding it steady, I can just put a pin in. Now I pin and then cut, but obviously if you want to pattern weight, use pattern weights and then chalk round and then cut out, or use a rotary cutter, then you just do your favourite method. This one just works for me. The only thing I have to be careful of with this pattern and with this method is that each time I cut it out, I don't slice off a little edge of my fabric, because over time, the more times I use this pattern, obviously my pattern will shrink slightly. So you just need to just be aware of that to make sure that you don't keep making your pattern smaller and smaller, otherwise it'll alter the fit. So I'm just going to carry on with this on the sleeve, and that's going to give us a whole load of fabric over there as well, which is great. So I've more than, how much have I got left at the bottom? Because this was this was a 2 metre piece of fabric, and I thought I'd need 2.5, and I've got 31 centimetres of fabric left at the bottom. So again, that will just give you some idea. This is a 14 to 16, and it's an EF cut size as well on here. But using that double fold method of laying fabric out really does help, I think, to use the most out of your fabric wherever possible. So that's my sleeve, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to cut that out, and then I might get the pocket out of this bottom bit here. Rather than cut into that nice big square there, which I can use for something else, I'll see if I can get my pockets out of this section down here instead, and maybe even one up here, and that will then preserve a larger chunk. Rather than having a long skinny strip, I'll have a bit of a better strip to use. So let's just cut this out. Don't you just love that sound? Keep your fabric and pattern as flat as you can while you're cutting. Long stripes are good, but when you're going around the curves, you have to just take those smaller little nibbles just to make sure that it's right. You can always trim it up afterwards once it's free of the main piece of fabric if you need to. Okay, let's pop that over on our pile of cut out pieces. We've still got the facings to do as well. Maybe they might fit down here. But I think I'll move the fabric over slightly to fit that on, and then we've got the other facing there, so they will fit on down there. Okay. Let's see if I can get my other pocket bag that I've already cut out. So I've already got one cut out the other way, so I'm going to flip my pocket bag over, and yes, I'll be able to fit another one out this way here. So I'm going to fit that onto there. So that uses that scrap up, which is quite useful to do. Get the most economical use of our fabric. So let me just take this pattern piece off here now, and then I'll flip it over. I think it must be lunchtime, folks. What time is it? 20 to 1. The traffic noise has increased considerably. So there's the writing, and that's that way of my fabric. So I need to know to get left and right, I need one to be cut out the other way round. So I just flick my pattern piece over and then attach it onto my fabric. Put it over here slightly as we can. Make sure that all parts of the pattern are on the pattern piece, and if you've got a grain line, make sure that you copy that across into the fabric as well, and copy that, otherwise you'll alter the stretch and the fit of that pattern piece. This will give me my second one of this, and then I've got two of the other ones cut out, which I might be able to cut out mirrored, not mirrored, in one go. If your pins don't want to go through, just give them a little twist, and that will help your pins come through. Okay. So I can cut this one out now with confidence. And I'll always try and use the scraps up on my fabric before I cut into the main part, so that I keep as much intact as I can do. And I do keep it in my stash. there might be enough there to make a little girl's skirt out of, which would be nice. Okay, so now when I've done that, I'll just turn this pattern piece over and put them both together and put a pin in, because then I've got this ready for when I'm marking my notches then. So let's put them as right sides together. As you can see, they match each other perfectly, and then I can turn that over that way, pop my pattern piece on top, and I'll just pin it top and bottom. We've got a notch down here, so I'll pin it by that notch there, and that will just keep it all together for me. So that piece is all done now, so I can go on the cut pile, and then I can concentrate on cutting out the facings and the other two pockets that I've got to do. Okay, I'll come back to you when I've done those. So I've just finished cutting out. I thought I'd show you what I'd got left. So I've got this nice square here, or a rectangle here that's still left. My fabric's actually 62 inches wide across, so if that helps you with and I had 2 meters of this fabric. So this bit here is, with our careful cutting out and no pattern matching, is all intact. I've got this amount of scraps that I'm going to use as my test and use to throw away. They're a bit too skinny for using for anything in particular with this large print. If that was cotton, though, I would save it and cut it up for quilting, for patching. And I've saved these pieces here so that if in the future I decide to make something from it, these I feel are possibly big enough, maybe not all of them, but some of them are big enough to be able to fit something out of them. So I'll put these with the main fabric when I fold that up and put it away, and save that for future projects. But as I say, that's going to be my scraps, and then I've got everything all cut out. So we're on to the sewing. So welcome to my sewing room. I've just had a quick tidy up. Yes, this is tidy. And hopefully we can get started now on the sewing. Now I am going to work through the booklet that we get with the pattern, and just so that if you are following along with your pattern, then you're not going to be confused by me keep jumping all over the place. And I've also got a couple of little scraps that I've got so that I can test my stitches, and also my overlocker on my fabric before I start sewing. Now, Jenny at Cashmerette, so Jenny Rushmore at Cashmerette, sews this on a sewing machine, but then she does overlock the edges. And I know that Scuba and Ponte don't fray at all, but again, it just gives that polished look to a garment if it's just got those neatened edges. So we're going to be doing that with ours as well, and I'll be using this the same way that she's done with hers. So the first step that we do in our little booklet is we have to interface the 2 neck edges. Now I didn't on this dress, and I do feel it's got a little tendency just to roll. I have understitched it as well, but even with that it's still stretching slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the interfacing. Now because we've got a stretch fabric on here, it's got a bit of a stretch across, I want to keep some of that property but just give it a little bit of extra thickness. So when I cut out my interfacing, I've got this it's more of an interlock interfacing rather than a woven interfacing, and there's no stretch across either north to south or east to west. So what I'm going to do is a little tip that my old sewing teacher Tanya taught me, is that if you cut out your facings on the bias instead, then you do get some stretch in with your facing, and that can make it all the difference between your garment then for being able to get it on and off, and it stretching without it pulling and anything ripping. So I'm going to be doing that. If I struggle to find a fold on the bias, which can be sometimes be a bit of an issue, I should be okay though if I fold it that way, shouldn't I? Then I will fold it singularly and just overlap it just very slightly on the centre front seam, and that will then give me the same effect of putting those pieces up together but without it being on a fold. But I think in my head I've just worked out how to do it as I've been talking to you, so I'm going to have a go at doing that. So next thing I'm going to do is cut out my interfacing and then fuse that onto the front facing edge and the back facing. I'll see you in a minute. So I have just cut out my interfacings, ready to put those on. I did just have a quick look, and there aren't any pattern markings on my facing pieces that I needed to mark, although I have just put a little notch in the centre front of my fabric here, just by doing a little snip through the fabric, just by a couple of millimetres, because I do think that'll be handy when we're matching that up. So again, on this back piece, when I take the pattern pieces off, then I've actually put a little snip as well in the centre back, just so you might be able to see it better on that side. So those will then help me when I'm matching this up to make sure that we've got the centres together in both places. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to fuse with my iron the interfacing onto the back of my two pieces that need interfacing, the two facing pieces, and that's the bits that sit inside the neckline, front and back. And then we press these in. Now I do use a pressing cloth when I'm using interfacing, because it does have a tendency to stick to the back of your iron, which is not very good. And what I use as a pressing cloth is I use something called silk organza. This was a tip given to me by Alison Smith at Sew Wardrobe on one of her classes, and it's been absolutely fabulous. I've just overlocked the edges too, or not on that one because it had to cut a bit off, overlocked the edges in order to stop it from fraying. But then silk organza, and it's a real silk organza, it's got a nice body to it, but it actually takes the heat off when you're pressing anything. So when your hot iron goes on top of the silk organza, that will take away any possibility of scorch marks, or if you're working with a wool fabric, it'll stop that shine from going onto your fabrics. Obviously, I can't guarantee in every situation it won't, but in the majority of cases it won't. So I use this then when I'm interfacing things, because the other thing is it's translucent and you can actually see through quite nicely. So you can see as you're placing your pattern, it on top of your pattern pieces ready to press, you can see if there's any wrinkles or ruckles in your fabric, and make sure that everything's all lying straight as you want it to. So I'm going to take these interfacings over to the iron, and I'm just going to fuse, using the manufacturer's instructions, my interfacing onto my facing pieces. So I've just fused the piece onto the back of the fabric. Or just to say as well, I do always pre-wash my, not my interfacing, but I always pre-wash my fabric as well. So I always pre-wash that and launder it however I'm going to wash the dress. So in this case it was machine washed at 40 degrees and then it was left to air dry afterwards, and that's what I've done. Now what I wanted just to show is that that's the interfacing fused onto the back, and we've still got some of that stretch left in there, which is good because we've cut that interfacing on the bias. But look at the difference between how floppy this fabric is when I just hold on to it, and how it works, and then this fabric here. Can you see that's much stiffer, holding its shape much better? And that's what you want for a facing, because you want that facing to hold that neckline edge really nicely for you, so that it doesn't roll to the front and it's just got that little bit of stiffness to it. The dress, we want to have the fluidity, we want that to be nice when we're wearing it, and to drape beautifully, but for now this is on the facing, but that just shows you the difference. These little extra bits here I'll just trim off, that's fine. I'm going to overlock the edges here as well. So I'll just go ahead and put the interfacing onto the front facing, and then we'll be then ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so we're now working on marking our pattern pieces up with our notches, so that we know where we're going to have our clues for joining our pattern pieces together. And a notch is normally a little triangle that is shown on a pattern piece, and here you can see where I've snipped before, and we have a triangle and then we snip down the middle, and that is a match point. But what can happen is, especially if you're going to be overlocking these edges before you start working on them, is that you can go around and notch them all, but then they're all lost within the overlocked hem, or if you're zigzagging, or if you're using pinking shears, and these are pinking shears here to neaten your edges, which cut a zigzag on the edge and just put a bias edge on there to stop fraying. It just neatens up the edges. But if you're going to do any of those things, you're going to lose your notches. So I actually favour something called a tailor's tack. It's really quick and easy to do, and you get quicker at doing them the more you practice them. But I use a contrast thread, so in this case I'm using red, and I've got it double. And then wherever you've got your notch is due to be. Now I'm going to come slightly in because I know I'm going to lose a little bit when I overlock the edge of here. So normally you'd perhaps put it on the edge there, or you can use it to mark dots as well if you have any dots on your pattern pieces for a match point. So I take a stitch through both pieces of fabric and the pattern piece at the point of the triangle, and I leave about 1.5 inches of a tail. So that will go east to west, and then I go north to south on the same stitch, or the same place really for that stitch, and then just again leave a single, the loop, but at least when it's folded in half it's 1.5 inches, and then I snip my threads off again at about 1.5 inches. Obviously you can cut them off whatever you like, but you'll see why I like to have them quite long in the end. And then what you need to do is you need to take your scissors and just snip through the loop. Watch out for your pins. And that leaves this tuft of threads on this side and a little cross mark match point on the other side of, and don't forget the towel fabric is double here. So what happens then is that when you take off your pattern pieces, sorry for the wrinkling of the tissue paper, but it's a necessary thing to have on, is that when we then gently ease move it up slightly, when we gently ease the pattern piece, a paper pattern piece away from the fabric, we're left with the tuft in our fabric at the right point. The thing is though then is that this is through two pieces of fabric and we want that marking to be made on both pieces. So all you do then is keep your finger on one piece of fabric and just pull those threads through to make a bridge, if you like, of threads. Don't pull it all the way through because you need a tuft on both sides. And when you've got a bridge of threads, you can then snip through the middle. And if you look there, we've got at both those points, we've got little tufts of thread, which will be very clear to see. And we can happily overlock around these edges, just holding those tufts out the way as we go, and we won't have lost our match point. And again here, even though that's on both sides, when I come to that when I'm overlocking, I'll just hold those out the way, continue overlocking round, and that will mark up that pattern, that matching point on there. If you look at this piece of fabric pattern piece, which is the front bodice, I've actually used it to mark up all of my notches. So let's just pull that fabric off just gently. So we've got this little mix here of all these tufts, and then gently I can just ease those fabric pieces apart one at a time, make my bridge of threads, and then cut through. So that's why you need to leave it quite long on your tails, because you want to be able to have room to be able to pull these apart and to snip through your thread so that it just marks that. Just be careful that you don't catch your fabric with the ends of your, the blades of your scissors as you're snipping through those match points, because again it's just going to well, you're going to spoil your fabric, aren't you, if you do that. So then let's snip through that one. I think that's all of them. And then on the neckline I have just done one centre front little notch so that that'll match up with my facing. But then down here at the bottom of the centre front, probably going to overlock that edge. This one will be hidden by the facing, which is why I've not going to overlock that one. But here again at centre front, I've just put a little tailor's tack as well, and that will help me when I'm matching this up to make sure that I've got an even amount of fabric either side here, so I've not got one side that's puckering and one side that's tight. So go ahead now and mark all of your different match points with your tailor's tacks. Just rewind the video if you're not quite sure of what you're doing. Match all of those on, and then when I finish doing that, I always put my pattern piece back on again and just usually just anchor it just with one pin so that I know which pattern piece it is that I'm working with. So that's what I'm then going to do next. So there was just one one thing that I noticed while I was marking my tailor's tacks out and I was very pleased with myself that I'd cut my centre back, my back panel for my top bodice and my back panel for my skirt on the straighter grain, so I didn't have to have that join. However, what I forgot to do was to take off the centimetre of seam allowance, because obviously that centimetre on each pattern piece makes a 2 centimetre difference, and that was too much of a difference for me to then be able to ease in. So if you are going to cut yours on the fold, then just move your pattern piece off the edge of your fabric by 1 centimetre, and that will take out the seam allowance that has been allowed on there for you to make that centre seam. So what I had to do then was laid my fabric out flat, made sure that I pinned through both pieces, and then I've snipped through the centre back of the bodice only and the centre back of the back skirt only. So the front skirt is still on the fold and the front bodice is still on the fold. I haven't altered those, and that will then correct it. So I'll have put a note in where I was pinning and where I was cutting out, just so that you know, and it'll be a reminder for you. But I just wanted to then go on and reiterate that point again. So apologies for that, but yeah, I wasn't thinking ahead. So next we're on to the back facing, because I've got a little addition that I want to put onto mine. So I've got some little handmade labels. I don't know if you can see how that looks on there. It just says handmade by Claire England, little glittery fabric, and this is actually the second order I've had of these because I've really liked putting my own labels in them. I think it really does elevate a garment. And so what I'm going to do with this is just fold it in half to find my centre point and then put a pin in, just to find that centre point on the actual label itself. And then I also do the same with my back facing piece, is I just fold that up on top of each other to make sure that that's straight. Alright, just, oh, don't put pink in your mouth when you're on camera, Claire. Is just fold it in half this way, and then I can just mark my centre across the bottom here. Let me just turn this camera down so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. So just folding the fabric in half, and that will then give me the centre point of my back facing. And I know that I'm going to overlock along the bottom here, and I know I'm going to have a 1 centimetre seam allowance around here. So it's up to you whereabouts you pop it, but I'm just going to pop mine round about in the middle, and I can line my pins up. The sides here, you just fold in. And you can press those if you want to, but just don't use too high a heat on your iron because it will melt your label if you're not careful. And so then once I've got that in place, then I will just take my pin out and re-pin through my fabric too. Oops, careful not to pin your fingers. And then I'll just take out the first pin and pin one edge in place. That'll stay still while I'm just stitching it. A little bit tough to get through because it's quite a close weave of the fabric. And I just got these labels online. I don't think it might have been Etsy. I'll have a look and see if I can find it, and if I can find where I got my labels from, then I'll drop you a link down below. No, I haven't got the piece of paper. I sometimes put a piece of paper in, but I've bought a few at a time actually, so I think I've got about 50 here. Because I do make my labels, then I've just got them in an old hummus tub, and I've just put a label on just to let me know what they are. But I'm just going to stitch that onto the back of there in a thread that matches this beigey colour for the label, and then that'll just be on there for now. I do it at the beginning because I always forget, and I get going on the stitching and then I forget to add it on later. But you can get some really interesting ones, can't you? You get some with funny anecdotes on them, you can get some with just a picture on, so it just depends on what you prefer. Or not, just skip this if you've not got any, but great for a little Christmas present, or for a birthday present, or just for a just because present if you want to treat yourself. But I really like putting those on because it just elevate it. You can also buy where are we? Labels for clothes that have got, excuse the noise, fabric composition as well. Get the right one. And I've got some here when I used to make children's clothes. Then these ones here are just satin ribbons with composition on them of fabrics. So, and again, keep away from fire, that type of thing. So you can use these then to put into your garments and just to remind you of what the wash care instructions are, or if it's a gift, then you can do that. So I've got a few of those. On this one though, I haven't got one for scuba fabric, so I'm not going to add one of those in. As I say, I just do use my hummus tubs because they're just so convenient for keeping things in. So put those back and we'll get on with sewing this label on. So here we go, we've got the label sewn on, and what I've done is I don't reverse when I'm starting and stopping. Instead, when I've finished, I take my threads through to the back, so that I have them all on the back here with a needle. So I just thread the thread up and then just take it through to the back. That way I can get it to join up perfectly without anything being messy on that side. But then once we're through to the other side here, then I take the threads, tie them in a knot, and then I thread them back in through, I usually do 3 knots. I don't know why, but that's what I was told to do. I think it gives it a nice secure finish, and then I will then rethread my needle here. Make sure the ends are straight. Okay, there we go, got both those through now. And then I just take a bite very close to where the knot has come up, through into my fabric, but not through my label, just through the back of the fabric there, just to make it a nice long tail. And then I'll pull it through, making sure it doesn't pucker, and then I'll just cut my threads off, and that then just makes that nice and neat. And I'll do the same with the other ones, just tie those in a knot, and then we'll have a nice neat label sewn on the back of our dress for future reference. Announce to the world what hard work we've put into making our dresses. The next thing I'm going to do is just change my machine foot, because I needed the little foot on for sewing my label on, but now I'm going to change over to a walking foot. Now, if you've not used a walking foot before, it's a fabulous bit of kit, especially for sewing with silky or with stretch fabrics, because if you can see here, there's feed dogs underneath the top here, and they move up and down with the needle movement, and they actually slot in to the feed dogs on the bottom of the bed here, because as you know, on the bottom of your ordinary presser foot, that's all smooth so the fabric can glide, and that's fine with woven fabrics, but when you're using a stretch, it has a tendency to create ripples in front of the presser foot as you're sewing, and then that'll send your seam slightly off. But if you change and use a walking foot, then you've got these feed dogs as well on the bottom there, and those ridges dig into the ridges on the bottom, and so both pieces of fabric are fed through at the same rate. It's a game changer, it really is. They're not cheap. This one is a Genomi branded one, and it was about £50, so just slightly over that in euros, and it depends on what your currency is, but well worth it, really is well worth having. The other thing is that I did try a cheaper one just to see how it was, and it lasted a couple of months and then it was broken, whereas this one isn't probably a year in and still doing really well. So that's what I would suggest you do as well. So I'm just going to change my foot over and get my walking foot on, and if you've got one, then I would suggest you do the same, and then we'll be ready for sewing. Quick thought, if you've not used a walking foot before, this lever here, there's usually a lever like this that's separate to the actual foot itself. That has to go over your needle tightening bar. So if on your machine, you'll have a bar where your needle is tightened, which mine is just here, look. And I'll screw that and the needle will drop out. And that's the bar, because that bar moves up and down as you're sewing. And we want this bar here to move up and down as we're sewing too, so the two work in unison together. So I usually clip that bar over the top of my needle bar first, and then I can position the clamp around the shank for the foot where you attach your feet on, and then with a little bit of good luck and precision, you'll be able to get that screw on. I usually hand tighten it as much as I can, and then tighten it up with my screwdriver that came with my machine. Yours might be slightly different. They're all slightly different depending on the brand of your sewing machine. But as I say, really, really good. So, have that on my machine. So, let's see what's next. So, in the instructions, we put our interfacing onto the back of our garment, and now the instructions say to turn up 1/4 inch or 6mm and to position that in place. Now, I'm not going to do that because I don't want the bulk on my fabric. You could either use pinking shears if you wanted to, the ones that cuts the zigzag, or you can zigzag if you've not got an overlocker. I have got an overlocker, and I'm just going to run my overlocker along those two edges to make those neatened. I'm also going to overlock down the side seams of my skirt, and not the hem though, because the hem will turn up, and I'll do that with my cover stitch. And the sleeve hems I will also do, and the bottom of the body, so that's all nice and neat too. So I'm just going to get my overlocker set up and do those steps all together whilst I've got it out, and then we'll be moving on to sewing the darts. So I've just finished overlocking the piece I want to overlock now. So I have done both side seams on the skirt, and I've done the side seams on the sleeves, the ones that go down here. I've also done the back of the skirt as well, all of the back seams on there, and the waist seam. I haven't done the bodice yet, and I haven't done the pockets yet, because I'm going to actually overlock the pockets together to so that that saves on bulk, because if we overlock the edges of the pockets separately, we've got 2 lots of stitching there, and I only want 1, so we can use that to stitch together. And down the bodice as well, we're going to sew our darts by machine first, and again I want to overlock those in place down the side of the garment when it's sewn, so that it doesn't then stick out, or we don't have bulk again there, because if you think about the 2 edges of the darts when they're put together, and then the edge of the bodice, we're going to have 3 lots of overlocking stitches there all lying on top of each other, which is going to create a lot of bulk, whereas if we line it all up once we've sewn those darts in place and then overlock, we've only got one lot of overlocking stitches down there. So I know it's only minor, but little things like that can make a big difference to how bulky your clothes look when you finish them. So again, that's just to say that's just a quick thing as to what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put my overlocker to one side for now, and we're going to get on with sewing the darts. Okay, so we're going to change the stitch over to a zigzag stitch first, which is number 8 on my machine, and then we need a stitch width of 0.5 and we need a stitch length of 2.5. Okay, so we've got that on my machine. Let's just try this. So I've just got a strap of fabric. We're just going to try those settings and just see how we get on with that. So I heard my bobbin just object slightly. Although it's okay, we've got a couple of skip stitches in there, so it's not very happy. Let me just try that again. Try a little bit slower maybe, sometimes that helps. Nope, still got skip stitches, so I'm going to try changing my needle because I think that's what might be wrong with this. So just hold on 1 second while we change my needle. Actually changed it to a Schmetz jersey needle. Let's try that one, and I've chosen the size 70, so let's see how that works out for us. Okay, that feels a lot smoother. So we've got no skip stitches there at all, and we've got a little bit of stretch in the stitch, which is what we wanted it to have, and it's great front and back compared to the others. So I'm going to stick with this Schmetz needle on my scuba fabric, but do a test on your fabric and see what works for you, because you want that nice smooth line, and as I say, if we pull it apart, it's lovely and neat. That will do us just nicely. Okay, so next thing we want to do now is to choose either our front or our back bodice pieces. In this case, we're going to be working with our back. Take the pins out, remove the pattern. And I keep a little carrier bag, freezer bag close to me, so that when I finish with my pattern pieces, they can go straight in the bag. And that way then it just means everything stays tidy, I don't lose anything. So we've got our tailor's tacks in this fabric already. So all we need to do is locate on this bottom hem here where our 2 notches are, and we can do that on the bottom here by putting a pin through one, a pin through the other, smooshing those together, and then we'll be good to go. And then we then go up to the top here and make sure the fold goes through the centre of the notch that we made with our tailor's tacks. That's holding it, and then I'll just put a pin down the middle just here again. And then if you need to, you can put a line across here with a ruler and just put a friction pen mark across, or you just sort of line it across, and then you know you get ready to go to nothing. I always start at the open end of the dart. I do reverse stitch to hold my fibres, and then I sew in a continuous line until I sew off actually at the point of the dart. So let me just show you that. So we're going to line the needle up with the edge of the darts, a couple of stitches forward holding on to our threads and a couple of stitches back. Put my needle in my work so that when I pull my pins out, my fabric stays still for me. And then I'm going to sew at a slight angle, and I'm estimating where I'm going to finish at the end here. So we want it to be as smooth as possible. That walking foot's noisy, but it's doing its job. And there we go, straight off the end there. And then I leave a long thread at the end, because then what I do on my darts is I tie the knots together, tie them together 3 times. Not pulling too tight because you don't want to pucker the end of your dart. 1, 2, 3, and then I just then snip the threads off with about 1/2 inch to spare. I'll take off my threads at the beginning. Do that all the way through so that we don't then have a whole load of threads to sort out at the end. And there we've got a very nicely sewn dart. it the right way around, and it's finishing absolutely at that tailor's tack where that end dart is. All we need to do then, because we're finished with this tailor's tack now, is we can just pull on the threads and they should just pull away. Sometimes they don't, and if we get to one where it doesn't, then I will show you what we do with that. But so far these all seem to be pulling out nicely. Oh, we've got one that's stuck, so that's good. I can show you what to do with that one. But most of them generally will pull out. So if you've got a tailor's tack that is stuck, what it means is that when you've stitched through through your row of stitching, you've actually caught the thread inside the line of stitching. All that you need to do then is try and locate the other half if you can do, which is here. And then if we pull that fabric back and snip that close to the fabric, that will loosen off the fibres, and then when you go to this side to pull, it just pulls straight away. So don't go yanking on your threads, because you could snap your seam that you've just sewn. But as I say, if you just snip one side close to the fibres, make sure you've got the other side, and then you can just pull it straight through. Okay, so that's one dart done. So I'm going to go on now and sew the rest of the darts in the bodice and in the skirt, and then we'll press these darts the way that Jenny has said in the book, and I always have to check. So the bust darts go, so the side bust darts go up, and the waist bust darts go in towards the centre front on the front bodice, and at the back the waist darts all go in towards the centre front. So really all your darts go into the centre front apart from your bust one that goes up. Okay, so I'll come back to you when we've done that. Just a quick tip on pressing your darts. You might find it useful to have one of these, which is a tailor's ham, or one of these which is called a sleeve roll, and they're very, very good at pressing, because they can take the high heat of your iron and some steam, and you can press over there, and you can use the different angles to press into different curves. So for example, on here we have got a bodice piece here, so I'm just going to lay my dart across the tailor's ham for the first pass. We're just going to iron it flat and just set our stitches. But then we're going to open up our bodice piece and we're going to press it towards the centre back. So I'm going to just use my hand just to coax the fabric the right way. And then as you can see, we're going towards this point here. I left the tailor's tack in so you can see where we're heading towards. Then I'm just going to put my press cloth over the top, and as you can see, I can see through to see exactly what I'm doing. And then I'm going to use my iron, but I'm pressing it over the top of this ham, which then presses the curve into the dart rather than trying to press it flat and creating a bubble at the end. So that's what we need to do. So we're just going to press all of these darts in that same way and just use the different curves of the pressing tools as we need to get those straight. Okay, so once we've got our darts all sewn, the other thing that I tend to do is just put a couple of stitches across it inside the seam allowance here, just to hold the dart in the correct direction that I want it to be sewn. I don't want it to twist when I'm sewing it, so if we just put a couple of stitches in just to push these in the right direction, then we'll know where we are when we're sewing on our garment. It doesn't take long, it just takes a few seconds literally to just put a couple of stitches in, and that will just hold that dart in place flat for me and remind me which direction it needs to be without me having to think about it.